This video is going to be the kind of video I wish I had when I started, because it took me at least a year to get to the point where I understand perfumery as deeply as I do it now, and I had to dig through a lot of false information, confusing information to get where I am now. And even then, and many of the things that I'm going to share I came up with myself because, well, nobody told me this. Either because this information is behind paywalls or just people don't talk about it, I don't know. But before I start, this is for the people who want to create their own fragrances as a hobby, or maybe you want to start your own brand and you want to have your own formulas, you want to be original, you don't want to just duplicate somebody and call it a day. I'm going to show you this as clearly as possible, and I promise by the end of this you'll understand 80% of perfumery in this context that we're talking about, where you want to create your own fragrance. I'll be using backwards engineering as usual. The very first thing when you learn perfumery is you want to define your goal. What do you want to do? If you don't know what you want to achieve, you don't know what is required. In my example, I want to create my own fragrances. I want to create them for myself so I can wear it and enjoy it. And I also want to create fragrances for my own brand, which you can see on my channel. I'm documenting the build of it. Thinking backwards, in order to create my own fragrance, what needs to happen for this to be true? Well, I just need to blend the right materials in the right ratios and I'll have a fragrance. It's not that difficult. It's super simple. It's kind of like cooking. You take a few ingredients, you put them together and you have food. You can find recipes online or just fool around, but the point is you just put together things and you have food. In the same example, you put together materials and you have a fragrance. Therefore, you need to have materials and of course equipment in order to create your own fragrances, but you also need to have formulas that you like. If you're a perfumer who wants to work for other people, this will still be relevant, I think, but this video is specifically for those who want to create fragrances for themselves. First, I'll cover the left side about materials because that's the simplest. It's literally as simple as you need quality materials, you need perfumer's alcohol to dilute these materials or to dilute the final concentration. You need to have a scale because otherwise you'll be counting drops, which will only serve you in the very beginning, but you don't want to be counting hundreds and thousands of drops when you make larger formulas. So just get a scale. The one I bought cost 10-15 euros from Amazon. It still works after a year, and the only reason you would need to upgrade to a more expensive scale is if you want to start to do this commercially, you want to sell commercial fragrances, and you want that precision to make sure you're selling the same thing every time. But if you're just fooling around at home, it really doesn't matter. If you have more money, you can get the more sensitive scale, which goes to 0.001. If you don't have that much money, you can go to 0.01. It's still fine. You'll just use more material and you will need larger containers to store your results. Just keep that in mind, because if you have a less sensitive scale, your formulas need to be scaled up a little more if you're using ingredients at very small amounts. What else? You'll need beakers, pipettes, and gloves for blending. Beakers is simply a thing where you'll put the materials in while you're making the fragrance. You don't need this. If you're using something like 10 milliliter storage containers, you can just put that on your scale. That is what I do. I just put things in the container. I don't really use a beaker. You need pipettes to take the material from the bottle and put it in your beaker or the storage container. And if you're making small batches, I suggest you get 0.2 milliliter pipettes because they're more affordable and you won't be wasting huge pipettes. And since you will likely put just 1 or 2 drops at a time for many materials, you won't be wasting a huge amount of plastic, which is not good for the environment anyway. Also, you can put smaller drops with it, so it's good. Finally, you will need storage containers to store your results in. I suggest at least 5 ml, but you can go up to 10 or 20 in some cases. More than that is only if you know that you will need a lot of liquid, like 100 ml, 1 kilo, something like that. If you're handling powders and crystals, you will need tiny spoons to take the material and maybe a funnel if you're using powder and your bottle has a small opening. I did not mention on the screen, but you will also need just paper strips to smell your creations. But they don't have to be expensive. You can literally just buy a watercolor paper from a craft shop, cut it, and you'll have your papers. It doesn't have to be fancy at all. It's just paper, literally. Personally, I also use a bottle like this to store the alcohol because it's very easy to add it in. That's really all you need. Optionally, you can get stirring machine, although I don't really know the exact benefits of that. I haven't used it myself yet, haven't had the need, but I just know that if you have larger batches, you will want a stirring machine so that the liquid macerates equally. Otherwise, I've heard you can have some uneven maceration. If you plan to filter the fragrances, like you're using very dense materials like ouds and resins, you might want to consider a filter paper and a stand, but these don't cost much anyway. And if you will be working with something like resins or solids or other materials that need heat to be useful, you will need a heating pad. I bought this coffee heating pad from Temu for like 15 euro, and it's working so far. I use it to heat up cashmere and tonka bean, and it works just fine. So my point is, when you're starting out, you don't need expensive equipment, and really all you need is these first black things. All right, let's move on to the next thing. Let's say you have equipment, you have the materials physically in your house. I almost forgot gloves. You also need this because some materials can be very stinky. Some materials are not good for your skin at a high concentration. And since you will be working with them, it is inevitable that something will spill or you'll get it on your skin. So just buy a couple of this. Again, I buy them from Temu. It doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to buy this from some medical shop or some overpriced science shop. Just get some gloves. Now let's move on to the more juicy thing. Is in order to create your fragrances, you don't need just materials and equipment. You need to have formulas. Formulas that you love. Because if you're making formulas you don't like, you won't be happy. It's not going to be a good experience. And you will not want to continue. Let's think backwards from this. To have formulas you like, there are three conditions that need to be true. First is you need to do experiments, because you cannot think your way to a formula. You must smell your way to the formula. The second thing is you need to understand and know your taste, because how else are you going to make something you like if you don't know what you like or what you don't like? And finally, you need to understand some technicalities and just some general information about perfumery. And we will go over all of this. First, let's look at a simpler thing, which is experiments. Perfumery is partially art and partially science. And in both, you do experiments to learn new things. Like I said, the reason we need to do experiments is because we cannot think our way to a formula, and we must smell different things in order to know what they will smell like. Unless you have years of experience and you know what everything smells like, you cannot really predict these things. So keep a list of what you did, what kind of experiments you have done. If you can, also keep samples in the bottles so you can later reference these experiments and go back and see if anything changed or if you still like it or still don't like it. Try to combine materials that you like. Try to combine accords that you like. Try unusual material combinations, new accord formulas. Try to recreate popular fragrances. You can get paid formulas from various sources and then just try to recreate it for learning purposes. To simply understand how the fragrances that you love are actually made. And it's also okay to do random tests, but just learn from them, because that is the only case where a random test is okay. If you just do a test and you don't take any notes, you don't learn from the failure or the success, then that is a waste of material. So if you do a random experiment, make sure to take notes. The good thing is that all these things you talked about, they don't participate just to the do experiments condition. They also participate to you developing your taste. By combining materials, accords, and trying combinations, you will understand yourself better. And in perfumery, taste is like a huge deal. It's really a huge deal. But how can you understand your taste? This has two components. You must know what you do like, and you must know what you do not like. Both are equally important, and that applies both to raw ingredients and fragrance profiles. When I'm talking about fragrance profiles, I mean something like Fugiers, Chypre, Gourmand, Grosjean, Modern, Old School. Just understanding different fragrance profiles, smelling them, and taking notes about what you like specifically and what you don't like about these things. This is what I did. I went to the store, I smelled all kinds of fragrances, I took many notes. When I got back home, and I analyzed to understand what is it that I like about the fragrances and what is it that I don't like. So for example, I learned that I don't like fragrances that are very pointy and very single scent oriented. I like fragrances that are mysterious, where I can't really tell what I'm smelling. If I can't tell that I'm smelling something like pink pepper, for example, I don't like it. And these kinds of data points are really important when developing your taste. All right, let's keep going. If you're watching this and you're like, I don't really know what I like or what I don't like. Or maybe you think, I know what fragrances I like or don't like, but I don't know about ingredients, and maybe it's a mix of these. The reason this is true is because you don't have the vocabulary linked to actual smells and actual experiences. And the reason this is true is because you have not smelled enough things yet, or you have smelled the things, but you don't know what it is called. Let me give you an example. This is you, the person. You know that there's something called milky, but you think you don't like it. But you have never smelled it. You think it smells like cow's milk, and therefore you dislike it in your head. But you don't have an actual experience of it. So whatever you think of it is, well, it's not true or false. It's neither, because you don't know. You're just guessing that you won't like it. But maybe at the same time, you have smelled this perfume and you really love it, but you don't know what it's made out of. You don't know what is the ingredient that you smell and you really love. And maybe it turns out that this is a milky scent that you loved, but you just didn't know that it's called a milky profile or whatever. So all this time you thought you don't like milky scents, but really you didn't know that what you like is called milky, and you just had a false assumption. And therefore you would never buy lactonic materials. I think that's what it's called, like decalactone, or something like that I recently bought. You never buy these because you just don't know that this is what you like. You don't know this is what it's called. Or maybe you wouldn't buy it because you don't know what it is and you don't want to risk it. In either case, it is important that you smell different things and you learn what this is called. For example, if you don't know what a fougere smells like, research fougere fragrances, find a fragrance that is a typical fougere, or ideally you find more modern and also old school versions of these fragrances. Then go to the shops, take some paper strips, spray them, and learn what the fougere smells like. Or if you have money, you could buy many materials and just buy a couple materials from each olfactory family, like gourmands, balsamic, aromatic, citrusy, animalic, milky, creamy, powdery. Buy all kinds of materials and then learn what this family smells like, and ideally you buy a material that represents this family the best. And in this way you would build your vocabulary and you would link the words that people use to actual experiences, because it is not enough that you know what something is called and what it's supposed to smell like. You need to know experientially what it smells like. Otherwise you don't really know what you're doing. Otherwise you don't really know what people are talking about. You're guessing. Alright, so you're going to be smelling a lot of things. You'll be learning what they are called. You'll be learning what kind of olfactory families are there. You'll be linking these words to actual experiences, both for ingredients and profiles. And that's going to help you know what you like and what you don't like. And that will help you understand your taste. Now let's go to this last part. It's not enough that you do experiments and that you understand your taste. Although this is like, I would say, the majority of what you need to know. Because if you do experiments and you do understand your taste, eventually you will create a formula that you like. But sometimes it may not be enough. And sometimes, especially if you want to do commercial formulas, you will want to understand the technicalities so that you don't have to do a million experiments, because you have structure to follow, you know why something works and doesn't work. These first 2 points will help you understand the what you want to create, what you want to avoid. But it doesn't help you understand the why behind it. It doesn't help you understand why a certain formula works or doesn't work. It's kind of like this example. You know how to play guitar, but you don't understand music theory, so you cannot explain it. And yes, you don't need to explain or know music theory in order to play guitar. But let's say where maybe you want to work with a music producer and you want to explain to them exactly what kind of instrumental you want to be produced, but you cannot explain it because you don't have any words for it. You don't know how to talk about beats and MIDI keyboards and whatnot. So you would have a very hard time to communicate with the music producer. And in the same way, you might know how to create a beautiful fragrance when you do it, but you will not be able to explain it to anyone in case you need it. Even explaining it to yourself to learn from it and create a similar fragrance. If you don't know how the previous one works, it might be harder to create the next one that's similar without doing thousands of experiments. I will touch on each of these points quickly and then I will go deeply into each one. First of all, you have to understand that projection and longevity are opposing forces most of the time. You cannot have a fragrance that projects like crazy and lasts for weeks. Yes, there are some materials that can do this, but that gives you a very limited palette and it reduces your creative expression range. So you might end up smelling just like another vanilla fragrance. The second thing to drop is the myth of top hard base. That is marketing vocabulary. The whole idea of a top hard base in a pyramid is not helping you as a perfumer. What you care about is the heart of the perfume, because that's where it lives. The perfume lives in the notes that last the average. The top of a perfume is usually negligible. The heart lasts for hours and it also projects well. The base, it usually doesn't project and is also negligible. That is why I would pay more attention to the heart than the top or the base, because that's what you'll be smelling most of the time. Practically, not physically. Next, everything in perfumery is about layers and patterns. There's a difference between hero materials and utility materials or functional materials, and you need to understand the difference. Next, you need to understand that accords are not set in stone. You have creative freedom. I also suggest you learn the purpose of DPG, and you need to understand that higher final dilution means lower projection most of the time. Unless you compare something like 2% super EDT versus 15% EDP. The 2% might be just so weak that nobody can smell it. But if you compare something like 10 to 15 or 15 to 20, usually the higher concentration is going to project less, but it will last longer. Also, there's no right or wrong in perfumery. Perfumery is art. So take with a grain of salt the advice from people who use the terms of right and wrong. For example, never do this, never do that. This is what a perfume should smell like. This is what a perfume should cost like. The rights and wrongs, shoulds and musts, those are opinions. Perfumery in the context that we talk about is art. And of course, you need to learn how to balance materials, how to balance scents. But there is no perfect balance. There's simply a balance that you like. Now I will go deeply into each of these. So projection versus longevity. First of all, I already published a video a few weeks ago about this. Go check that out. It's really detailed. But what I want to say is, yes, these are opposing forces. And this is 80% material choice and only 20% of how the formula is structured. There is no magic material that will help your perfume last forever. And it's not just about one material or about some magic structure, some magic combinations. It's simply about you choosing the right materials and making sure that they're balanced. What I mean is, if you want a perfume that lasts long, choose materials that last a long time. It makes sense. If you want a perfume that projects like crazy, choose the materials that jump out of the bottle when you smell them. Just know that the long-lasting materials will have lower projection usually, and the high projection materials will usually have a shorter lifespan. Yes, there are materials that do both, but like I said, this is a limited palette. And just like in cooking, if you want to make something feel more salty, you will need to use salt and you will taste the salt. You cannot make something salty without tasting the salt. In the same way in perfumery, if you want something to last long, you need to use materials that last long, but you will taste them. You will smell them. That's why I say it's important what materials you choose, is because if you choose the wrong kind of long-lasting materials, and the wrong in this case is the ones you don't like, then yes, it will last a long time, but you will not like it. Same with projection. You might make a perfume project like crazy by using aldehydes, but if you don't like aldehydes or those specific materials that you use, then yes, you have successfully created a projecting perfume, but you will hate it. And it doesn't mean that you failed to make a projecting perfume, it just means you choose the wrong materials. Next, about the top hard base myth, because there are infinite pyramid levels. Some materials don't fit neatly into the top box or the hard or the base because they last a different amount of time. When you're building a perfume, forget about top, hard, and base and think about how will the perfume evolve, because each different material has a different lifespan, and your job is not to put them in boxes. Your job is to arrange them in such a way that you like the evolution. Because look, top notes are not the first ones you smell. That's only in marketing, that's only in stores. When you're making a perfume, top notes are the ones that last the shortest amount of time, if you want to use the vocab of top, hard, base. And hard notes are not the second one you smell. They're not in the middle. They simply last the average time within that specific formula. And same with base notes. They're not the last ones you smell. They simply last the longest. You'll still smell the base when you first spray the perfume, like if you use vanilla. That is a base note technically, but you will smell the effect of vanilla from the first second when you spray it. And in some formulas, the hard notes act like top notes because they last the shortest amount of time in that specific context. To illustrate this even further, think about your perfumes like this. I know the quality of this screenshot is not the best, but look, here you can see how long this material lasts. 1 hour, 4, 8. And here you have the material. So lemon, less than 1 hour. Linalool, like 3 hours. Timber silk, 8. The others, 8. Musks and labdanum, over 12 hours. So in this example, lemon and linalool can be considered top notes because they last the shortest amount of time. Timber silk and clearwood can be considered hard because they'll last the average, if you look at it like this. And the muscanone, labdanum, these last the longest, therefore they're the base. But if we did not have lemon and the linalool, right? Now the timber silk and vermoss and clearwood, these are top notes. And there are really no hard notes in this example, just these ones. To balance a perfume here would mean you want the steps to be as smooth as possible. And in this example, we may want to add a material that lasts slightly longer here so that there is more evolution and it's not so abrupt after the 8-hour mark. That's what we could do. Or we could also extend the top part of the perfume and add a material that lasts something like this, maybe 5 hours, because otherwise we're going to be smelling lemon and linalool for a little while, and then it's going to drop to timber silk and clearwood for the next 8 hours. You could also visualize it like this, but this might be too confusing. It's more about how the material is perceived over time. The perfume lives in the heart. We already talked about it, therefore I would pay most attention to this. And just like previously I showed you, the perfume lives in the heart because look, the top, it lasts 1 hour, and then you have the heart here, which lasts 4 to 8 hours. The projection of this heart is going to be perhaps arm's length, maybe more, maybe less, but that's kind of the projection of this. The top notes, yes, they will project like crazy, but for a very short time. And then the base maybe lasts 12 hours, but the projection is going to be very low. It's skin level. So you want to pay attention to the materials that last more than 2 hours and less than 8 hours, kind of like that. It's not set in stone rules, it's just guidelines, because these materials will usually last enough to be felt like long lasting and project enough to be felt like they're strong. Everything is about layers and patterns, because a perfume is simply a combination of accords. That's how you can look at it. This perspective would make perfumery easier for you. If you think of a perfume simply as a combination of accords, it is not some magical list of ingredients. You're combining smells, you're combining accords, and an accord is not magic either. It is some solo notes plus maybe smaller accords, and then smaller accords contain many single ingredients, right? But even a single note, maybe like a mandarin, it can contain multiple notes. Maybe one that makes it juicier, one that makes it sharper, one that makes it more green. It's just everything is layers. For example, let's say you want to create a citrus perfume, and you know, I want this to smell like mandarin, orange, lemon. Those would be accords that you need to create. So if you don't already have in your library a mandarin, orange, lemon accords, you would not go out into the world trying to find the perfect material that smells like a mandarin, because you would succeed more likely if you try to create a mandarin accord. This is a fictional example. I don't really know what a mandarin accord looks like. I'm yet to do that. But if I were to do it, I would try to combine my mandarin essential oil with fructone. That would make it feel more juicier and less hospital-like. And I would also try to combine it with orange because they seem to share a similar DNA. The mandarin is just kind of colder and less sweet. And maybe I would add some green material. But that's how I would create a mandarin accord. And then I would use this accord within the perfume. I would repeat this process with the orange accord. I would make a lemon accord. And then I would simply combine them. Maybe mandarin would be 2, lemon would be 1, orange 3, or something like that. And in the end, I would have a citrus perfume. It ends there. It doesn't have to always last 10 hours. One thing I wish I did sooner is to build a collection of accords. Because what I did is I just did random experiments, make random formulas, and I lacked the second step, which is understanding my taste. I did not know what I like. I did not know how to create any accords, so I was always guessing and the result was not that good. But once I started to learn about accords and making different experiments where I try different accords, suddenly I could start seeing ideas for perfumes that I would like to create. And I actually did create 2 perfumes that I like. One I created on camera on this channel, you can see that. One of the first videos in this series where I built the brand, I built the formula as well. So if you feel like you don't know what kind of perfume you want to create, I suggest you start by building a collection of accords that you like personally. And that leads me to the second point, where there are hero materials and there are utilities. There is a difference. Not every material that you buy is going to be a hero. Some materials like Hedione, Isoi Super, you don't smell them, but you will feel the effect. And I would say that even this is not a fact. If you want Hedione to be the hero scent, you can. You just have to understand that Hedione is very transparent, which means that if you use another material in combination with Hedione, that material is very likely to overshadow Hedione and you won't smell Hedione anymore. So the balancing would have to be very careful. Think about a perfume like Molecule 1 or Molecule 2, I don't remember which one, but they use something like Isoi Super as the only ingredient in that perfume. In that context, Isoi Super is the hero scent. The reason I'm talking about this is because you need to buy both functional materials like Hedion, which will help you with projection, and ISO Super, which will help you with blending different notes together, and maybe buying green materials to make your citruses feel more green, aldehydes to help with the lift, whatever. And you also buy the hero materials, which are the materials you actually want to smell in the perfume. This is what I wish somebody told me, because I was under the impression that the reason these master perfumes that I like smell so good is because they're using special materials or they're using some kind of great combination, when in reality I just like that particular material, and if I were to find that material myself, then I could build a perfume around it, because that's the material I want, that's the hero material. And I would rather have 10 materials that I absolutely love than 100 that I don't like at all, or just I'm neutral towards, because I won't like that perfume. It doesn't matter how complex or how beautiful the composition is. If I don't like the hero material, I will not want to wear it. Now here's going to be a big one. Accords are not set in stone. This is what I really wish somebody told me. Because I was hunting for accords. I was thinking, I need to find the perfect apple accord. Like, what is an apple accord? Where do I find it? And I did find many different versions, but I thought, which is the real one? Like, which is the thing that smells like an apple? And that was the wrong kind of thinking, because there are all kinds of apples. And an apple accord simply points to that direction of apples. It doesn't point to a very specific apple. So what you need to do is to learn the skeleton and then modify it to preference. Let's take amber, for example. That is a fantasy accord. Learning the skeleton would mean you learn that it contains labdanum, benzoin resinoid, and vanillin. Those are the three that are kind of like the core of this accord. I don't remember the exact ratio, but maybe it was something like 3-3-1, maybe. I might be wrong. But the point is, you learn the skeleton and then you modify it to preference. Maybe you don't want this much benzoin, so your version could be 3-1-1 of the ratios. Or maybe you want your amber to be more fruity, so you add fructone, 1 part. Or maybe you add patchouli, 2 parts. The mistake is thinking that there's some kind of perfect amber accord and trying to chase it. There is no perfect accord. There's simply the accords you like. Same goes with something like Fougères and Chypre accords. This happened to me yesterday. Some long time ago, I made a Chypre accord and I hated it. I thought it smells so old school and just weird. And I thought, how can this be a whole genre of perfume? It's just awful. But then I learned about pink Chypre. I learned about new Chypre, like a modern version of Chypre. And I modified the accord. I made my own Chypre accord that I like. And I immediately knew that I liked the smell. And just like that, I transformed a smell I don't like into something I do like. And I know that what I made may not be the perfect Chypre. And I know that what I made may not be the original Chypre. But who cares? This is my taste. I'm making something that I like. It doesn't matter what other people have done. Because if I want to make fragrances that I enjoy, I need to make something that I like. So yes, learn the skeleton of an accord and modify it to preference. You can have multiple modifications. It's okay if you have 10 different amber accords that you like. You don't need to have just one. Stop chasing perfection. Learn the purpose of DPG. All I will say is that DPG can help with longevity, and in some cases it's better to dilute your materials with DPG instead of ethanol, because DPG evaporates slower than ethanol, and that can help with performance in certain cases. I will be able to talk more about DPG once I test it myself, so I'll be trying out DPG and telling you what I think. Higher final dilution means lower projection. I think I already spoke about this. There's no right and wrong in perfumery, because perfumery is art. And in non-artistic aspects are usually just for safety and practicality, storage. There's no art in compliance documents or storage conditions and the physics behind it. But what compositions you make, what you like or don't like, what you want to sell in the market, what you want to sell to other people, that is art. It's just like music. You make what you like, you make what brings you joy, you share it with other people. Don't listen to the critics too much, because everybody has their own taste. And at the end of the day, those are just opinions, which everybody has their own. So just follow your heart and don't be too harsh on yourself. Don't think that you have to spend a year on a perfume for it to be worth anything, because art does not live on a timeline. Some of the greatest songs have been written in days, and some have been written over courses of decades. So just because something takes a long time doesn't mean that it's better. And when it comes to balance, just learn how to systematically balance. This, I would say, comes with practice and intuition, because as you develop your taste, you will also learn the ability to intuitively reduce certain amounts from the formula. You will intuitively know which materials you want to add less. And when you smell something and you don't like it, you will be able to spot the particular thing that you don't like. For example, you make a accord that's supposed to smell like a mandarin, and it's supposed to be a top accord, you know, the one that lasts a couple minutes, and you smell it and you don't really like it. If you know your taste, you will be able to spot that what you don't like is the greenness of it, in my example. And then you look at the formula and you know, oh, the material that makes this feel more green in the way that I don't like is the mandarin essential oil, so I will use less of that and maybe add more orange. The balanced scents is important, and there's probably more depth to this to talk about it, since you might need a separate video. But I would say that if you pay attention to your taste and you do experiments, then over time you will develop the ability to balance intuitively, and you won't need to think about this too much. This was a really big video. My voice is dead. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. I hope this was useful. This is what I wish somebody told me, and now I'm sharing this with you. If anything was really useful, it would be great if you write in the comments so I can see what kind of info resonates with people, so maybe I can speak about them more.